So for some of you, this will be some recap of kind of the basic features, and then we'll get into some more kind of advanced particular things that are going to be particularly relevant for sharing here.
Yep, you're sharing your screen.
Particularly relevant for your ALACRITY funded R03 projects. I'm not going to try to go into everything that REDCap can do. There's tons it can do, but I'm going to try to focus on just a few key things. In addition, I just sent about an hour ago an email with a document that has links to online videos that are going to be providing instructions to all the things we're going to go over today. So in case you forget, how do you do that exact thing, you can just access that as a resource. And if you still are confused, feel free, obviously, to send me an email, ask me any questions. So quick overview of what REDCap is, for those of you who are not familiar. It's an online data collection software. It's designed to be secure and adaptable to various sorts of research needs. The ALACRITY Center has a goal of sort of developing this matrix of usability issues in order to identify common themes and as well as unique features across projects. And so we're trying to standardize the collection of certain types of our data to help us achieve this. REDCap can be used to collect data for all of the standard ALACRITY required measures. Most of you are probably familiar with what those are. If not, send me an email. I can send you the document which lists what sort of measures are required for what sort of projects. That includes things like usability scales, patient outcomes for some studies, as well as demographic measures for all of your participants. All of these measures have been already built in REDCap. These are all the blue ones here. And they can be combined together in projects and administered back to back. In addition, any other measures that you're planning on using for your project that aren't ALACRITY specific measures can be built for you, or we can support you in building those yourself. And REDCap can also be useful in storage for things like interview recordings as well as other study files. So it's a file storage functionality as well. And those things can be linked to participant ID. So a quick overview of this REDCap home screen. You have your My Projects tab, where as you can see, you can color code and organize your different projects into folders. When you want to create a new project, you do that here and select the type of project that it is, and then you'd send a request. And that typically takes about 30 minutes to 2 hours for a REDCap administrator to approve that. There's also plenty of resources for help and training up top here, and I want to call your attention to this little banner here, which shows that every Wednesday between 2 and 3 p.m. there's a Zoom meeting in which REDCap administrators can help you with any specific questions you have. So that can be a great resource if you have any further questions beyond what we covered today. So one of the most important processes for building your tools related to the ALACRITY specific measures, I'm going to cover that first. So let's say we want to build a project that includes the demographic survey, the intervention usability scale, and a payment tracking tool. So this is the process for that. You're going to open the demographic survey, navigate in the project setup tab to the online designer, and then from this actions tab, choose download instrument zip, and that will download the zip folder for you. You can save it in a useful location, and I'll repeat this process with the other tools. So let's use the iOS, online designer, download, save. And finally, our payment tracking tool. Do the same thing here. Then we'll go to our new project. So I just built these kind of dummy demo projects. I can navigate to the online designer. And from here, I'll upload this instrument zip. And I'll start with demographics form. and then IUS. Oops. And then our payment tracking form. And so now I have a new project with all three of these measures.
I don't think I did this.
Oh, I missed one, it looks like. Don't need this one anymore. And as you can see, this project is now copied, these measures are now copied into the new project. So we do ask you that you copy from this sort of master sheet, the blue ones, rather than sending participants the link to this sheet itself. That's just in case you need to make changes to the form to make it match your project, that nothing gets changed for the other projects who are also going to use the form. And that'll also help us identify where the data is coming from when we access it later. And then feel free to make any changes as needed. However, we do ask that you don't change variable names. And variable names are these labels right here: variable project, variable subproject. You could theoretically change them by hitting this little edit button in the online designer and then editing that. Please don't do that because that'll make our lives difficult with downloading and analyzing data down the road. To build your own projects and tools, I'll give a quick overview of the online designer and what its functions are. There's tons of documentation online about how to use this and what it can do, so I don't want to go too into depth, but essentially here's your edit tab, which you can use to create various types of variables or fields. That can be things like multiple choice options, yes or no, text boxes, as well as file uploads. So if you want to upload something like a recording of an interview, that's how you do this.
How would you do it starting from scratch?
Good question. Let's go to one of these dummy files that I haven't added anything to yet. So we'd open our instrument, and then you'd start with add field.
Okay.
And let's say the first field, we want to make a multiple choice question. What projects? We'd enter these kind of things. And now we have this.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you were to start from scratch, what would you label the variable as? Would that be important to also to include if you're also starting from scratch?
So for anything you're starting from scratch is going to be a tool that is unique to your project, and it's not one of the standardized ALACRITY tools. Because if you're using the ALACRITY tools, we ask you to download using the process I just showed. So for that, you just want to make sure you're labeling it as something you're going to be able to remember, and that's linked to the content of the question.
Okay.
Yeah.
We would ask, sorry if I interrupt, we would ask that you put probably a prefix of a few characters for each variable name if you're creating something new that's just for your project. Now will just help us ensure that we don't have any conflicting variable names with existing variable names that we have in there.
Right.
Is there a suggestion of the prefix? Like, I guess just so that it doesn't become confusing and like the
Something probably related to the title of the
Okay.
measure that you're collecting. Yeah, that'd be great. So for example, here I have the IUS, and I've labeled, I think, everything IUS name, IUS project. Yeah, good questions. One thing I want to point out is that if you need to be able to track who's who, for example, if you're collecting data from the same participants at multiple time points, we do recommend asking for their name in the first form if that's not going to be a risk to them. And you can also store someone's name as an identifier, which which I'll show you how to do in the online designer here. You can click yes on identify here, and that will impact who is able to access that information. So you can keep it so that you as a researcher are the only people who have access to that. But I'll get some more on that in a moment here. And then there's other strategies we have for tracking participants, which I'll touch on later as well. One key feature when you're building your own tools, or even as you're building tools for the ALACRITY required measures, is that you determine whether this, the tool is going to be filled out by you as the researcher or distributed to participants. So the way that comes into play is right here, where you choose whether you are enabling each tool as a survey. So for example, here you can see my demographics measure is enabled as a survey. My intervention usability scale is enabled as a survey. That would allow me to send out a link or distribute an email inviting people to participate. And then my payment tracking is something I'm going to be just using on my end. So I don't need to have participants get access to that. I'm going to enter the data myself. This project home tab, project setup tab, is a great sort of checklist of all the things you need to take care of before you're ready to send out your surveys. I'm going to call your attention to a couple things here. User rights is where you can share this project with collaborators, so your research team, as well as I'm going to want to make sure that you're sharing this with me so I have access and can get the ALACRITY Center methods team able to analyze this data as well as you guys. It also recommends that you test your project thoroughly, which you can do by sending a survey link to your research team, or feel free to send it to me or Mike. We'd be happy to look at any surveys you're building. And I'll show you how to get that link in a moment here. And finally, this is key, before you send out any surveys to participants, you're going to want to move your project to production mode. This means your project is live and you're collecting real data now. So once you're done testing, you're going to move it to this mode. And it is still possible to make changes and edits to your survey once you're in production mode, but it does require approval by an ALACRITY, by a REDCap administrator. So sometimes that takes a little bit of time. So to distribute surveys and collect data, there's a couple different ways we can do this. I'll start with the most sort of ideal version. If you go to Survey Distribution Tools, you can build a participant list where you add participants via email. And that will allow you to track individual participants as well as control sort of your distribution timing and reminders to complete the survey. You can also, in Survey Distribution Tools, share this public survey URL, which is going to just be a link that you can email to participants.
So just to double check, once you click on the project, the survey distribution tool will be an option. Is that right?
That's a good question, actually. So I was about to get to that.
Oh,
but
sorry. Okay.
that will only be an option if surveys are enabled for your project.
Okay.
Right. So that's kind of the key thing about enabling surveys, is that's going to allow you to distribute the survey. If you don't have any surveys enabled, like let's say, for example, you're going to be entering all the data yourself with the participant, you do that via the record status dashboard, which you can access here, and you can sort of click on each individual item. Go back. Let's say we want to add a new record. We can start with this scale, fill everything out, save, and then move on to the next one. And if surveys are enabled, you do still have access to the record status dashboard. So if you're going to use maybe mixed methods of sometimes having participants fill out via link and sometimes do it yourself, you do want to enable your surveys. And finally, as I was mentioning, if you want to collect survey data by hand, bringing in a form or bringing in a laptop, and entering your the data yourself with the participant, that's fine. And you do that via the record status dashboard.
Can we ask about that?
Sorry.
Well, I guess we were kind of talking a little bit more about, with data collection and using like the survey, and we're going to be going out remotely to sites and whatnot. And if they're, wondering from other projects too, if there would be a benefit to using real-time laptop and bringing a laptop into, the sites, and then for them to complete it really right there,
Yeah.
instead of sending it an email later.
That's definitely an option, yeah.
Is it an option? Like, can I ask if others projects would be interested or had thought about like how they would be doing data collection, and if it was going to be on paper, or if you're thinking about using it online, or?
Yeah, direct entry would be preferred if we have equipment for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're trying to think about if there's an option to buy it through the center.
I think, I don't remember what exactly the status of this is, but I know we were talking about getting sort of a library of tech, things like iPads or whatever that you can use and load out to bring to your sites when you're collecting data.
Okay.
So let's follow up individually about that, because I need to check what the status of that is.
Oh, okay. Do you know what types of are preferred? Like whether it's Apple or the Microsoft Surface laptops. I guess to be able to use REDCap both online, and I think there's an offline version too, right? Where it's just kind of a data entry. Is that right? Or there's apps.
I'm not sure
and
about
all
that.
this
I know it's compatible with pretty much anything.
Okay.
So yeah. I'm not aware of using it offline though. If that was the case, I think you might want
app. Sorry, that might be the app.
Yeah, no, REDCap definitely has an option for offline data collection. You don't need access to the internet. It'll upload later.
Okay.
I've never actually used it, but I know it's an option.
Okay.
Great.
I don't know if it's helpful or answers your question, but I know another project did kind of like shadowing while they were asking questions. So they were collecting qualitative data and they were typing it themselves, just because it made the doctor's interview easier, just because they didn't have to be typing anything, and you could just ask the questions and they can just keep going in the flow of whatever they're saying and just type things up. So depending on how you're asking, what kind of questions.
Okay, that's good. And what are other projects, if I can ask the people who are also on Zoom too, or if anyone has started the data entry or the data collection process, if you were using laptops or if you're doing it all on paper, or if anyone had hints on what was working for them so far.
I don't know if the folks in the room or online have started data collection yet.
Yeah, I think there's just one, maybe and a half projects that have. So.
Okay.
I will be starting data collection this week, and I was planning to have a brief paper survey.
Okay.
For later.
And then, okay.
Great. So yeah, all of those are good options. It really, like, the most important thing is whatever is going to be easiest for your participants. And we can be flexible with any of those options. So just to quickly sort of review what we've covered so far, always make sure you're double checking that surveys are enabled if you're going to be sending a link to participants. Make sure your project is in production mode, which I'll show you one more time how to do that. It's in your project setup tab at the bottom here, move project to production. Before you're collecting data from participants. This is required before you can actually collect real data from participants. And then finally, via the user rights button, make sure your projects are shared with me. And let me know if you don't have my email.
Can I ask a question about that?
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to log into this REDCap account in order to download the surveys that we need to then upload to our project?
Good question. I didn't mention this, but I will make sure that so when you're ready to collect data, let me know and I'll be able to share each of these projects with you so you'll have access to be able to download via the process I showed you at the beginning. So you won't need to be in my account. You can be in your own REDCap account and you'll have access to all of these wonderful blue measures here. I
will say probably, if I can interrupt real quick, if you I think it might work best if basically everyone essentially considers Jed to be a member of their research team in terms of when measures are going to go out. And so just having really open communication with him around whether you're designing measures and when you're hoping to get those out, just to ensure that there's nothing that that delays things. As he mentioned earlier, there are certain things that need to be approved by REDCap project administrators, that sort of thing. And then he can also make sure that any measures that you develop are aligned with the current existing battery of measures and not kind of stepping on the toes, I guess, of the existing battery of measures too, that you're appropriately copying them and making your own projects. So please just keep him in the loop with everything.
Yeah. So basically the last thing I wanted to cover is accessing and downloading data. So I entered just a tiny bit of dummy data in this project here. In order to get a quick glimpse of your data, you can just click this data exports, reports and stats button. You can just hit view report and it'll show you just sort of a quick snapshot of all of your data here. You can also navigate to stats and charts and say we want to see charts from our demographics measure. Depending on what sort of question type you have, you'll get different plots. And then finally, if you want to download your data to Excel or to SPSS or to other statistical software, you're going to hit this export data option, choose your preferred software. So let's say we want to download to SPSS and just hit export data. And then you're going to want to make sure you carefully follow these instructions that are listed here. You have these 3 files and you need to run syntax in the correct order as it's explained here in order to properly download to SPSS. And I've tested this, it works just fine as long as you go in the correct order. So just sort of a final review here, series of do's and don'ts. Do make sure your surveys are enabled when necessary. Do make sure your project is in production mode before collecting any data. Do share projects with me before distributing, and do make sure you're communicating early prior to designing and distributing the tools, just so we're all on the same page and stuff's not happening at the last minute, and we all have the access we need and the right kind of design. One thing we ask you don't do is change the variable names, as I mentioned, on the required ALACRITY measures. Just so that when we are accessing that data, everything's the same and we can analyze it without having to make sure we're editing each individual variable name. Please don't wait till the last minute to start building your tools and asking questions of me or Mike. And finally, don't hesitate to ask any questions if anything comes up that you're curious about. And with that, I'll open it to any other questions we have in the room now.
For project teams that don't already have a REDCap account, is there a process that we go through?
I think all you have to do is log on to REDCap with your UW ID. Oh. And if you don't already have an account, it'll just make one for you. And I don't think that is a significant time burden or anything like that.
Great.
Yeah. And then I'll be able to share all the tools with you.
Can you send a survey link as a text rather than an email?
Yeah, that should work. And REDCap works on mobile devices as well.
Okay. So for that, like I would just feed, like I need to put the phone number, like, and then it will push like the standardized survey.
Oh, doing it from?
Yeah, from the system, because I saw like one of the options has to do with creating Twilio account or.
I wonder if we can.
May look like on the survey options.
QR code.
You know, I haven't figured that out yet, but I'm sure there's info online. And as I mentioned, pretty much everything we discussed today, I sent a document with links to explanations of how to do all this. So if you're confused about anything, feel free to access that. And I sort of listed each of the skills we went through and and have links there. Yeah. Yeah, there's so much that REDCap can do. I'm not even familiar with half of it yet, but tried to get a grasp on what seems most relevant for these projects.
Can we see an example survey? I'm just trying to think if like as soon as you make it into a survey that is participant facing, does it automatically, because like, you know, the data entry part is like very, you know, when you're actually going into data entry, but I think
Oh, you want to see what
like
the
an example of what the
survey looks
participant
like?
would see once
Sure.
they,
You can do that. Let's say we want to go into here. I believe that I can preview. Yeah, so this doesn't give you the most accurate picture. Let's if I go to, so I'm just going to open this link to fill out the survey. So this is what it looks like.
okay.
So it's a little prettier, yeah. And then you can also design it so that, let's say I wanted it to be a new page after these first 3 items. You'd fill those out, then you'd have a button to say next rather than submit. And then it would jump to the next page because this is a bit long.
So the formatting of the survey of when it's participant facing, if it's the one of the standardized or required tools, we probably can't change that or anything as far as because I think there's options for like radio buttons, and then there's options for like the you know, the
Right.
selection is so different, and that you don't want.
Yeah, please don't
okay.
play around with that.
Okay.
If there's something that you feel like you need to change that seems like it might be an issue, just let me know.
Okay.
We can maybe figure something out. But yeah, in general, try not to play too much
Yeah.
with the formatting
Okay.
of the standard tools, because we just want to make sure it's easy on the back end to compare across projects.
Okay. Sorry, one more time. What was the how do you enable the survey again? So
Cool. This is an important one.
Yeah.
So you enable surveys via the online designer. So actually there's a 2-step process here. In the project setup tab at the top, you need to choose to enable any surveys. And then in the online designer, you choose which individual tools you want to enable as surveys.
Oh, okay. So project setup is use surveys in this project. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So sometimes REDCap can be a little confusing with where things are.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
To go back to the texting question, I've been doing a little Googling. It seemed like there's a third-party software called Twilio that UW supports, and it sounds like the UW support could help you with that. That will support text messaging, SMS messaging for surveys.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, yeah. I see it like in the end, and the enable options module and customization at the very end. It's like Twilio SMS and voice call survey. Okay, so I see that this is probably where you send service like by text. Okay,
text. Yeah.
So for creating a new form, and if it's something where it's you know, it's scored Likert scale or whatever, would you be able to show me what that would look like?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So let's go to one of these empty projects here. We go to the online designer and add a field. If it's a Likert scale, we're probably going to want either one of these. So you can do a multiple choice question via drop-down list or via radio buttons. Let's choose drop-down list for now. And let's say it's how much did you like this intervention? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And if it was a, sorry, so the one, when I was just saying it, it would be a score of 1, comma, equals
Right.
not at all.
Okay, so yeah.
Okay, okay.
Right, so it's, yeah.
So if it was going to be, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Like that. And then that's just how it gets encoded. So when you export it,
Yeah.
it's a, let's say you're in SPSS, it's a 1 with a variable label of not at all.
Yeah. And then when you're doing like kind of just general data, like, because they calculate like really simple averages, right? They'll say for question 1, average was like a 3.67.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, and REDCap can do that, and then also whatever statistical software you export it to can do that as well.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Jed. This is Jess Tren, and I'm wondering if we have time to talk about branching logic at all. I'm sure it's in the links that you sent out, but I thought if you had an example to show us of branching logic, that might be helpful.
Yeah, that's a good question because that's something I imagine you guys will be using a lot. I think that the demographics form is probably the best example of that. Ooh, I'm in. Well, I don't want to go out of draft mode there, but I think I can access it here in draft mode. Okay, so you can see the branching logic gets displayed in red to the right of the variable label. And so for example here, we ask what project people are part of, and then depending on how they answer that, we ask which sub-project they're a part of. And the way you would choose that is this little green branching arrow. And you can do that either by entering sort of branching logic syntax up in the top here, or there's also drag and drop tools, which you can usually use. For some reason, it's not letting me do that right now. And you just, for example, drag your response codes over to this other box. Any specific questions about that?
No, that was really helpful. Thanks.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's pretty easy to use. And again, there's tons of information online. If you were even just to Google branching logic in REDCap, there'd be a couple videos that would show you how to use that.
Cool.
Anything else? Awesome. All right, well, thanks everyone. I'll wrap it up. As always, let me know if you have any questions. You can contact me via email and just, communicate as you're getting ready to build and distribute your measures. That's going to be the biggest takeaway.